few weeks ago, we saw the build-up of the National Unity Platform with the tour in their leader, Mr. Robert Chagulanyi, wherein he pulled crowds in his tour moving across the country. So in tonight's discussion, we pose a question that, do political crowds matter in the build-up towards elections? Now, joining me to discuss this very interesting topic is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen who will help us unpack tonight's conversation and put perspective in tonight's topic. So in no particular order, I'll just briefly let the ladies and gentlemen introduce themselves. Then we can begin the conversation. I'll begin from my extreme right. Denise, you're most welcome. Please introduce yourself, let the people know who you are, and in that order, then we shall begin the conversation. You're most welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Drake, and thank you for having me. My name is Denise Ayebare. I am a law student at Makerere University, as well as a human rights advocate.
Thank you very much, Denise. We're very happy to have you, and keep on seeing your faces on the social media. So definitely, you are not a new face here, and we're very happy to have you here tonight. Thank you. Right next to Denise is a face that we're seeing for the first time on the show. She's, I think I should introduce her, but let her do the honors. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Drake. Happy to be here. I'm Lawino Vanessa Faith. I'm a climate activist. I do accounting and finance at Uganda Martyrs University.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to having an engaging conversation with you, Faith, and definitely most happy to have you here. Thank you. Yes, the gentleman.
Thank you so much, Drake, for having me today and to the Civic Space team. My name is Dean Natukunda, and I'm an LLB graduate from Uganda Christian University, yet to join the Law Development Center. Happy to be here and looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Definitely looking forward to a fruitful discussion with you too. Last but not least.
Well, thank you very much, Drake, and I'm humbled to be here. My name is Nasirumbi Faustina, a human nutrition and dietetics student at Kyambogo University, also the GRC School of Vocational Studies there.
All right, so the common adage usually goes, ladies should come first. But tonight in today's panel, I think we have, the panel is feminine enough. So I'll begin with the gentleman to help put perspective in tonight's conversation. So I want us to look at the historical impact in terms of unpacking tonight's conversation, moving towards the question of, do political crowds matter an election build-up? The first thing that comes into my mind is, have we experienced something like that in the past? So my question to you is in line of historical impact. All right, so kindly contextualize for us this particular conversation with respect to the historical impact in regards to political crowds and in regards to the topic that we're discussing today.
Thank you so much, Drake, once again for having me, and thank you so much for that question. It's a very rich area, political crowds, because Uganda has a very rich political history. Looking at, or putting it in perspective, looking at the days before independence or the days when the colonial masters were here, we've had a lot of political movements or crowds that come together to drive towards that sort of need of independence, which has put us in a place where we are right now, fast forward. But looking at 1962 and the years that came before that, the Kabaka crisis, we had political parties like Kabaka Eka, we had political parties like UPC, we had political parties, very many that were there that started not as genuine political parties, but started as a replica of what People Power started as. It started as a pressure group, which later translated into a good and valid political party. What I'm saying is, political crowds have a very big impact on our political history. They have shown since time immemorial, looking at the 1900, when we received, if I'm to go back to my history classes, when we were receiving people like, when we had things like kingdoms, chiefdoms, looking at all those things, we had all those areas of people that came together to fight for their kings, to fight for their leaders, to fight for their chiefs, to fight for whatever leaders they were, their kings and all that. So those political sort of like crowds that enhance sort of like leadership or drive towards decisions to be made in the political arena have impacted our leadership and our political atmosphere since time immemorial. Fast forward 1962, we get independence, all these political parties are formed, and our history, which our constitution characterizes as that has been comprised of, turmoil and whatever it has been comprised of. But all that has happened because of still those political crowds that sort of like drive to either change or drive to enforce particular opinions onto the public at that particular time. All the presidents we have had at the time, they have come in power due to a 1, 2, 3, 4 people that came together, enforced an idea, got a crowd, and sold to them that idea, and actually got into a space where that idea was adopted by even larger crowds that later influenced change. So political crowds, putting it into courses, have defined our political arena here in Uganda. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. When you give us that well-detailed and outlined historical perspective, then the question that I'll be thinking of is what then motivates people to join political crowds during election campaigns. But particularly this that we experienced was in an election campaign. But nonetheless, it has a psychological impact, which then makes me forward the question to Denise. Just from what Dean was talking about when he gives us that well-outlined historical perspective. So the question to you is, what motivates people to join these political crowds and be part of something that they feel they should be part of in terms of the psychological impact and factors?
Okay, so thank you so much, Drake. Well, noticing how political crowds and how they rally support and everything, they have a tendency of shaping the perception of different individuals, right from mobilization to things like visibility, to things like ideologies that then these individuals believe in. So for far too long, I think in context, we have had where various young people have wanted change. Like I always say, me, myself, all of us here don't know a past regime. So when someone comes and is like a hope or is like the light in the darkness for many young people who have not seen for far too long any change or any president or any fair and free election, then it becomes very hopeful for them that they're going to identify with that then individual. So psychologically, individuals tend to identify with certain things they yearn for. And in this perspective,
Denise, on that point, you said people tend to identify with certain things they yearn for.
yes.
National Unity Platform, a few weeks ago, we saw the crowds that they pulled. Would you then assert that people are identifying with National Unity Platform because they yearn for change, or they yearn to identify with that party, and yet we did not see that translate in the election of 2021?
Yeah, you get it so much. And that's why I'm going to say, in a context of Uganda, political crowds do not amount to the certain support you're going to get at the end of it all, or it's not going to reflect in certain things, like the votes that are going to be. But for some leaders like Mugisha Muntu, given the numbers he has, or is translating the votes he always gets. So, but looking at how maybe the new political party has been and the kind of support it has, even previously on looking at Dr. Chiza Besigye and the kind of support they have always had, it doesn't translate in the votes that they usually get at the end, or the vote count up or the turn up that they usually get. And it is attributed to things like vote rigging or anything that is in the system. So psychologically, people have ideologies they want to see thrive in a certain community. And if those ideologies are then coming in, they are going to definitely identify with those people, with those political parties that are going to make it inevitable for them to see change.
All right. Vanessa,
Yes.
Denise says that people identify with those political parties on grounds of what they identify with or what they're fronting to put the change. From the context of Uganda, my observation is our people, first of all, do not vote ideas. Even in our university elections, what we see is people go and vote either someone has taken them for lunch, or people vote on grounds of, oh, he has greeted me, he has done that, but not ideas. So we see political crowds one or the other. Robert Chagulanyi is a renowned musician in this country. Some people could possibly pull for that crowd on grounds of excitement. So do we then have to argue that these crowds could build up to a different result come 2026?
Thank you again, Onen, for having me here. Well, to add on what she said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the crowds are going to pull, because there are other factors that affect for example, the electoral system, and also a lot of other factors in place. So I think in her regard, but it does build the visibility though. It brings the visibility because now people know Kyagulanyi. They know he's a very powerful person. But the problem is pulling the large crowds doesn't mean you're pulling all the votes. That's the problem.
Allow me to interject there. From the perspective of the national resistance movement, we have seen the crowds that the current president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, has pulled, and it translated into him winning elections
Yes.
over 5 times, right? I'm seeing my panelists are laughing. Smiling. Maybe you have something to say, but when time comes, you'll interject.
Okay.
His numbers have translated
Yes.
into results and him becoming president. What is the difference?
Okay. Like in 2021, in the Ugandan elections of 2021, we saw Kyagulanyi had a lot of numbers, right? A lot. And this is the time around here where people are like, Kyagulanyi is going to win, Kyagulanyi is going to win. We were all anticipating that, right? But then in the end, NRM won, Museveni won. So this brings a question of what exactly happened. People were like, there was vote rigging, there was what, but in the end, Museveni actually won. So there's a difference.
There's a difference.
Yes.
All right. Faustina, when Denise and Vanessa argue from that perspective of Kyagulanyi having his crowds and Museveni also bringing his crowds, but then there has other factors now. In my mind, I'm thinking of the principle of democracy. Democracy is the power of the people for the people, by the people, according to Abraham Lincoln. And democracy has 14 principles. And the principle that I'd like to highlight is the one of accepting election results. Yes? But in terms of accepting election results, over the years in our democracy in Uganda, people have contested results numerous times. But at the end of the day, the fact still remains that the crowds that Museveni pulls translates into results. But people are arguing that Kyagulanyi pulls crowds but does not translate into results. Now, I want you to paint for us the picture of the factors that Denise and Vanessa are trying to highlight, because you also smiled when I used the example of the current president of Uganda. So now, put that smile into perspective.
For the opportunity. Okay, trying to put that smile into perspective.
Yeah.
Realize now, Museveni, the president, he actually characterizing him, we actually just know his political side.
Yeah.
Like, that's the side most people actually know about him. But now the side, Bobby Wine has actually 2 sides. He has his original music career that actually most of us got to know him through. And now he's coming up with a political career. So from that, I would say that his crowds actually have 2 different sets of people. Have those that actually in his crowd because of his music career, the one that they have grown up knowing, and there are those that are actually now part of his crowd because of his political career. So with that, with having a crowd that is containing 2 different kinds of people, brings up a question I'll ask, that now everyone in that crowd, those that are coming in because of his music career, do they also ascertain to the actually electoral process? Are they registered voters? Do they actively participate? While from Museveni's side, whereby you know that people actually just know him from his political side, that gives you a characteristic that his crowd are people that are actually voters and understand the entire electoral process. So I believe that will actually bring up the reason why his crowds don't bring out results in the elections like the ones from Museveni.
I have a contested opinion,
But
though.
Jake,
But
on that point, I think we also need to analyze the way probably the president brings his crowds and everything. Because I think for far too long, we have had scenarios where individuals have been paid to come to the rallies, to come to the campaigns and everything. So I think even when you talk about the translation, and I think it's something we should talk about, should poor people be allowed to vote? Do they know what they want? If someone is going to give you 500 shillings to vote for someone and you're going to allow, then I think it becomes very...
Denise, the question of should poor people be allowed to vote? Our country is a country of 48 million people. 41% of that population are poor people.
Yes.
So if we deny the poor person who is majority of us, inclusive of me, the right to vote, don't we then go ahead and infringe the institution or the principle of democracy? I think it's a matter of debate. Maybe if you can justify why we should not allow poor people to vote, then we could maybe proceed with that. But the fact still remains. It's true that we have a largely poor country, but also the fact is we also have a largely young country who, by the way, in the recent 2021 elections, did not vote.
Exactly.
So then the issue then remains, do those political crowds translate in election results? Because for my district in Gulu, when people are supposed to go and vote for their members of parliament, the only 30% of young people turned up. So the other factors that could then therefore that, because you can see the persons who themselves like Robert Chagulanyi was arguing that you see these people cannot be taken away by your votes. Now, what are you trying to tell people? Okay, but I'm not here to discuss this, but you're the one supposed to help me unpack this. Natukunda, you have something to say.
Yeah, I think something we should put in perspective to make it very clear with our conversation today is something connected to interest, which is a very important aspect when it comes to the political arena. Going back to history, if I'm to go back, you realize the days of the French Revolution, King Louis and everything that came after that, and the French dynasty and everything that came after that. People were interested in this change. So the idea of participation was engraved within their marrow, and they wanted this change. And that is why they rallied behind people like Napoleon, behind people like even taking away Napoleon after all that leadership he had done and the good things he had done for France. And still that applies to our political history as Uganda, looking at the crowds we had then, 1962, 1970, all the crowds that came in 1986, and that in the middle, all those crowds came because they had the interest. But realize the interest only stays where one feels like their interest is being looked at and actually appreciated. So putting this in perspective, over the last elections, the people who participate according to the populace of Uganda has gone on reducing the percentage. Why? Because there is this whole, bad, I don't want to call it bad or good, but it's an aura out there that says that whether I vote or not, the outcome is already decided, which is a very bad attitude that is there to our political arena, because people are not participating, not because they don't want, but because they have all these conspiracy theories, I would call them, about all those, concoctions of elections and all that, which is really something you could also argue about.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to put in perspective is that almost 40% of Ugandans, actually 45% of Ugandans, don't go to participate in the election. 45% of Ugandans. That's a very sad number that is out there, and people that could actually influence an election. Recently, in the concluded election, I think Museveni had, 50-something, and Bobi Wine was on 45% around there. So you see the range is there, but then the people that are not voting are also many. And how can we be sure or even trust our electoral processes? And I think for the idea of Denise is that, yes, people could vote, but I think her idea is there could be people that could vote on behalf of others, which is also a development or a stage in democracy, and a very appreciated stage. I mean, democracies like the United States have appreciated that, which is something that has worked for them to emphasize and maintain the interest, because interest is very important in the political arena. Thank you.
All right. Denise, I'm interested in the idea that you raised that Dean was trying to emphasize. But before we get into your idea, I first want us to understand what exactly, from what Dean highlights, is people have this perception, this perspective that even if I vote, my voice will not be heard. And as I earlier on highlighted, that we are largely a young country. And I believe everyone on this panel has seen one president ever since they were born.
Yes.
So it's like if just even when we interact with our fellow peers, how many of us went and voted in the year 2021? See, so on a panel of 5 you have, on a panel of 4 you have one person who has voted. So that just tells you that many young people do not exercise the right to vote, possibly with the predicament that the results of that the outcome will be the same. So Denise, highlight for us the factors that are first of all demoralizing to translate those political crowds, the excitement that people have in campaigns, in these tours, into real tangible results. What is stopping people from, young people particularly, from from going to exercise their right? But also expound on your idea of the question of should poor people then be allowed to vote? Because as a poor person, I would be offended. Yes,
Okay, so on that point, one, I think we need to understand the context in which Uganda lives in, like the flow democracy. We have continuously created fear within individuals. And that is one thing we need to understand too. Looking at the year is going to be 2026, it's 2023. Do you think that they would have allowed those political crowds to come together in 2026? That would be a different question. So most of the campaigns have been disturbed, the kind of protests, people have been shut down, tear gassed, and all that. As a build up towards election, there is a difference in how much time is left and what would have been done if we were voting tomorrow. That wouldn't happen. So young people have sort of given up on the idea of change, fighting for change, or the will to continuously fight. Because if you look at the 2016 elections and you compare it to probably the 2021 elections, you're going to find that we had more young people turning up to vote as compared to 2021. But then looking at things like the Black November, looking at how protests and everything has been disturbed, then I think the question becomes, do people want change? Yes. And if they want it, at what cost are they willing then to make that sacrifice? The sacrifice with what the change then comes with is what people are then fearing. But then the second thing is that young people are now living a life of, you know what, it's okay, let him be there, let the president be there. I mean, the will to fight is no longer there. You cannot feel it. If you're going to talk to someone, our age mates, about politics, how many of them are interested? Very few are going to actually be interested to fight for what they believe in. If right now I asked some of you, can we go to the bush and probably plot a coup? How many of you are going then to show up to do that?
That's opinion. We shouldn't opt for coups because you see, as young people, we have the power to use our demographic to translate those results into tangible solutions.
Sure.
See what's happening in West Africa, largely young continent. Why shouldn't we then use our numbers to translate into tangible results?
It's been 5 times. We shall still wait. We are still hopeful. Well, like you say, so the kind of factors that we have, the kind of fear, the kind of sacrifice that young people are willing not to take is what is keeping them back. But then the third thing I talk about, see, majority of the young Ugandans or even that are out there, they are not aware, they are not sensitized about their importance, about their role in certain things like elections. For example, if you went to Koboko or Aleptong and got a random young person, let's not even talk about the majority of the people who are poor and are above 35, a young person, and you ask them what is their role in the elections, how can they do anything to change the situation that is happening in Uganda? They wouldn't tell you. They would tell you, if I vote or if I don't vote, nothing is going to change. If you empower citizens and you let them know about their importance, about their role, about their power to create change, then you're going to have the voter turnout like increase.
So Denise, before you proceed, so does that therefore mean that if we have an empowered and an enlightened citizenry that is quite informed of what they want, then the crowds that these political rallies would pull would be genuine, and then that would translate into real tangible election results?
You're able to understand the kind of power you have when you realize what it can do. So if you have that power and you know that if I voted, if we showed up 10 of us and we are 10, we can probably change something. Then you have a way to say that we can hold someone accountable. There is that kind of responsibility that is going to exist. But if individuals continuously do not show up, there is a way they're going to evade. Well, they're going to show you that 70% of individuals did not show up for voting. So how are you then going to hold people accountable? How are you going to prove things like vote rigging? But then the third thing you asked me to justify about poor people not voting and everything, I think this is for not for young people, but individuals who are above the age of 35 or even 40 and are experiencing the kind of shackles and everything we exist in Uganda. Well, majority of the people that exist in that particular paradigm, for far too long, do not know exactly what they want. We are going to see situations as we approach 2026, roads that have not been constructed. And the government is going to bring up all the cars and the lorries, everything, and put them there at the road. After the elections are done, they will drive those vehicles away and take them. But then too, you're going to find a scenario where they're going to pay these individuals to show up. There are very many scenarios, like in a cell, they're probably going to give you 150. Only 100 people exist in a cell. And if you're able to know that, you know what, I'm going to probably take a glass of alcohol or anything, I'm going to vote that person. So you see that the kind of system we are living in has continuously enslaved us. To know that if I'm going to be given 1,000, 10,000, then you're going to buy me. You're going to buy us. So it sort of enslaves us that then we cannot know who to vote and what to vote for. So the entire idea of saying landowners, policymakers or anything should be the one that are going to vote, because they understand how directly they are affected by these policies that are made. But if you find a person who does not know how they're going to be affected, who does not know what they're going to do or anything, it becomes very difficult for them to decide, should I vote or shouldn't I vote? But if you're paying me, then I'm going to vote for you because I am poor and it seems like salvation to me. So, yeah.
All right. That's very radical. For maybe for the viewers who are joining us, we're talking about do political crowds matter in a build-up towards elections? And Denise has posed a very radical argument in terms of sidelining poor people, and she justified it rightly. But for someone who is like me, who is poor, and I'm being sidelined, I'm like, okay, Denise, who is running for MP of her municipality, came and offered me 100,000, then I'll definitely vote for Denise. And you find a one Natukunda Dean who is highly studied and an elite of this wonderful country would vote and exercise his duty well, knowing that he's voting someone who is going to go and offer change to our institution. But then the fact remains that largely many people vote, and they're poor people who exercise their right on grounds that they have been coerced.
Oh, Drake, I put emphasis on the above 35 and towards the 50. I think it's very important.
It's all right. Let me get to Vanessa.
Yes, please.
The issue of media and public opinion. We have seen over the years, example, what happened in Kenya in the year 2022, yes, when they held the election. Media and public opinion is very important.
Yeah.
And that is what informs politics. Because if the media reports negatively about a particular individual, definitely the public opinion changes. And with a political crowd, the media has the power to tell a story of what that crowd can do. And we have seen recently what has happened with the tour that His Excellency Robert Chagulanyi was conducting. We saw what happened in Luero. The road was closed, I think, for a couple of hours. Mm-hmm. And that alone has sparked debate, and we're here talking about it. Okay. Now, what impact does that have in terms of the role of media, but also the impact it has in creating a public perception? Will that in any way affect or translate into results in 2026?
Well, we know we are in the era of social media. I have two opinions of that. I think, yes, it will affect the results, but I don't think it will affect them so much. As I said, there are other factors. And also, I wanted to talk about how, us as youth, us as young people, we talk a lot and we don't do a lot of action. That is the basic problem. Mm. Yes. Because, if we were to come up as youth and actually use that Chagulanyi protest and the closing of the road and using hashtags, if we were all to come and, bombard social media and what, I think they would actually open the road or something, because people are actually using social media too.
Social media activism.
Yeah, exactly. It's actually a real thing, and it can cause a very big impact. Because, it's not only Uganda watching, it's the whole world. So I feel like it can bring a really positive change, like a big change to the whole system. But we need to use it right. We need to use it. We don't actually use these things. We just talk, but the action is very minimal. Yes.
All right. Faustina, still on discussing media and public opinion, I'm still interested in what happened with the tour that Chagulanyi had, which was unfortunately halted by the police on grounds that they were causing
Chaos.
chaos in the community. But that aside, you're aware that the media still has a very important role to play in creating public opinion and in informing elections. What is your say?
Thank you again for the opportunity. My say when it comes to actually media, yes, it has a very great impact that it will either create a perception that someone actually wants to support that person or create a perception that actually this person is not the best option. So if we are to focus on Chagulanyi saga, like his tour, media actually covering that, it provided information to actually people out there that even weren't actually aware that he was making the tour. And will it impact the elections in 2026? Its impact, I think, at some point will actually be minimal because, as Vanessa said, as youth, we talk and talk and talk that right now it will be the topic, but actually by December we'll have transition to something else, and that will be history. That its impact may even actually not be felt, that may even not go beyond 2023.
Someone
To go like
argued.
that.
Someone argued that we Ugandans forget so much.
Yeah.
Do you know how hedgehogs? I think they're called hedgehogs. If you watch Lion King, Pumbaa,
Oh, Pumba.
Yeah.
those animals forget in like 3 seconds. Once it bypasses you, it
Yes.
has forgotten.
Yeah.
So the memories of Ugandans are like Pumbaa. Sorry to say, but we forget so fast. Events happen, and all of a sudden we have shifted into something else.
Yeah.
But then I'm interested in digital engagement. Vanessa highlights very key issues in regards to the role of social media, and we're aware of the fact that social media has played very key and significant part in terms of informing elections, in terms of informing politics of nations in this 21st century. Now, how has social media evolved political crowds over the years? Do we have people who do not actually go physically on the rally, but are engaged actively online? What is your say? How has social media evolved? How has it evolved political crowds and in terms of informing elections?
Thank you so much. I must say it's an interesting conversation that we're having here right now, and there are very good opinions from the panel. And
Radical.
I wouldn't choose that. But I will start like this. Change is a fact of life. And there is a wise man that once noted that if you want to expect different results, then you have to do something different. You can't do the same thing expecting different results. And I feel like our electoral process has been the same. It's been sort of like, let's do this, and this. Time comes, we vote, and time goes, and we have a president, which is very okay. About the digital part influences a lot of political decisions. You can understand why Elon Musk is out there saying that he's trying to reduce on the tweets you can see in a day, not because he wants to reduce them. This was his argument, and I would like to subscribe to it. But because he thinks that we are addicts, because someone can be on Twitter the whole day. We have people like Twitter influencers. We have people that may be called specialists on social media platforms like TikTok. We have even people who think they influence on WhatsApp. Maybe they have a lot of status viewers or something. So what I'm trying to talk about here, what I'm trying to put in, there is a lot of information that is disseminated within the media. So does the digital part affect or influence any information that goes into the political crowds? Yes. But where is the problem? The problem is that with the digital or digitalization of whatever political arena we are in, creates a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So there is a lot of information that is disparted since there isn't a gauge to decide what information goes there. Because even right now, I could get my phone and say that this is happening. And people do that a lot. People fake whatever is happening, but that doesn't mean that people don't say the truth. So the media, has it done more harm than good? Yes. Does it affect the political crowds? Yes. In what way? In a wrong way? To a larger extent? Yes. In the right way? To a smaller extent. And that is my argument. Clearly premised on the fact that if we are going to create any change, if we are going to see how these political crowds come and influence change in our country, then social media should be a tool we use, yes, but it shouldn't be the yardstick to determine, just like political crowds, they shouldn't be a yardstick to determine whether either Mr. Mugisha Muntu or retired General Mugisha Muntu shall go on to win the election, whether the President Museveni shall go on to win the election. I mean, all of us here, I think, have interacted with people that come from up country. People up country, the other side, know one thing, the bus. And as long as they see the bus, that is what they are going to vote. Because the bus sold to them ideas they subscribe to. So political pressure in its presence does not define to what extent a person up country is going to cast their vote. I can tell you, I was in the village when I voted. We had candidates of every political party, for member of parliament, male and female. But I can tell you that people didn't vote for the NUP candidates just because they didn't want. They voted for the NRM candidate because of the bus. Because the bus has been here far too long and people have subscribed to its ideas.
Just like how people in your village voted for the bus.
Yes.
Here in the central region, they were saying in Uganda, there's a way they put it that where you see the umbrella, tick.
Yes, but then the disadvantages of that have gone on to materialize and have been seen. So to conclude on my point, to put it into perspective, political crowds, whatever they do is credible. They influence, they build momentum, they do whatever, they create accountability, they create a space for good, adjudication of issues in what is so-called the public court. But the disadvantages of thinking that the political crowds, or even subscribing to the fact that political crowds can be used as a yardstick to who is going to win a particular election, is very disastrous to our political either future or history. Thank you.
All right. Denise says it's disastrous. And we have seen countries rely on political crowds, even opinion polls, for example, as an evolution in terms of what social media can do. For example, the United States, I wouldn't want to compare the democracy of Uganda and the United States, but I'm using the example of opinion polls. That opinion polls is what the public think. It's a crowd. People decide on who they think is going to win. And we have seen over the years, the opinion polls in the United States oftentimes say who wins. And that's what people think. But then let's bring the conversation back to our Uganda. Here we see crowds, people come, and I was reading comments over the media, and people like, this time Ugandans have spoken. Ugandans have turned up for what they want. But in this panel, we are still discussing those factors that are impeding the realization of those numbers into reality. You highlighted the issue of one, lack of an informed voter, lack of an informed citizenry when it comes to voting, but also the issue of paid, corruption, vote rigging, among others. Before we delve deeper into discussing this, what ways do you think, apart from the radical argument that you raise, which is very good, in what ways do you think we can then inform or improve our democracy in terms of voter turnout, citizenry participation, young people being involved in what we want? Because the decisions we make now is going to affect our lives in the next 50 years to come. What's your say, Denise?
Well, like most of the people, you see, there is nothing for young people without young people. So even when we talk about the kind of their involvement, the kind of their role into changing and shaping the kind of politics and the perspective we need, then we need to understand three things. One is that majority of the young people, just like it is the Electoral Commission's role, their voting and education offices, to educate young people about their role in elections, to educate them about the kind of awareness they need to create. I think as we study things in our education system, you see, we just study a small section in P6, I think, the Electoral Commission and what it does, right? These are certain things that affect us. Even as we look at our education system, I think we need to study things that matter. Probably all of us know about Napoleon and anything. How have we used him? Though we can use him as a model to shape our politics and everything, but we need to study things that are in our own perspective. If you're going to talk about things like education, we don't want to learn about the Rayleighs, something like that, Canadian prairies and all that. Teach us about things that affect us. Let us know our history. Let us know where we are coming from, and let us know what role then we can play. And that is what.
Have you heard the saying that history is written by the victors?
Well, that's
stated
okay.
by Napoleon.
Stated by Napoleon. So. But either way, when you talk about certain things, you see, when you meet someone in the States and ask them anything about Uganda or anything about Africa, they might tell you Africa is a country. Why? Because they do not study what doesn't matter. They study about their countries. They study about what matters. Well, as you're here moving, a very brilliant Ugandan, from number 1 to number 100, you know what Napoleon did, the revolution, everything. But you don't know anything about your history. You don't know anything about how it can shape, what your role is in shaping the kind of politics we have. And I think it's vital to use the education system, because that's where the majority of the young people are going to fall, right from primary, high school, tertiary, universities. So it's very important for us to use education as a tool of disseminating this kind of information, the role of young people in shaping a better Uganda. But then the second thing, we need to, like we've talked about social media, right? Majority of the young people, even when we talk about going on social media, just like Dean said, we are going to spend the entire day scrolling through things like Twitter or Instagram that do not benefit us. Why don't we then incentivize ourselves to learn, to study, to know things, how we can do things, how we can better our country? You see, majority of the people, wherever they're going to be, let's say ministries, parastatals, and when they call upon young people, they're going to despise them, ageism, that they have nothing to bring on the table. So you find that young people are continuously undermined, even when they know things, because they feel that they can't bring anything to the table. If they're going to be policy makers, you're not going to have majority of them being young people. The decisions that are being made are continuously sidelining the young people who those decisions are going to affect. So it's very important for us to immerse ourselves in the kind of knowledge that is going to empower us, that if you're given a platform, you could probably convince policymakers, decision makers, to include you in these policies, to include you in the system, so that you're not isolated out of the system. But then lastly, about how we can then have the entire political process, electoral process, and us shaping the future of Uganda. I think one thing is that we need to decolonize our minds in terms of understanding and in terms of loving our country. I think it's patriotism, and that's something the old general would say, patriotism, love your country as you love yourselves or anything. And he's going to preach things like Pan-Africanism. He's going to preach other things, but we need to look at the bigger picture. What is the bigger picture? We can't start fighting. Young people are going to start talking about Ugandans. Let's see what is happening in West Africa or anything. No, things like neocolonialism, neoliberalization, I don't think that they're things that we need to look at, because these things have made us continuously run away from responsibilities, continuously make our governments run away from accountability. Let's start with calling out the small things. Look at what SPA is doing, the kind of roads, reducing our parliamentary budget, rather than saying, oh, well, to hell with maybe the states or anything. Sometimes I think that if we had to operate Uganda like a business, probably call a CEO and they manage Uganda as a business, what would happen? Like, if you're able to manage then the country like that, make sure that healthcare is there, free education is there, and then the kind of individuals that are going to exist, or the young people, are looking at the bigger picture. We don't have roads, the parliamentary budget, calling out the relevant things and not the things that are irrelevant to us or that look far-fetched from us. So things like accountability, transparency are things we should be minding, are things that we should be calling out. Governments, the budget, majority of it goes to military or the police or anything? Have we called it out? Yet 3% of it is going to go to things like education or healthcare. These are certain things we need to understand, but we cannot understand them without the information reaching the grassroots. So the information that should be disseminated should be considering the kind of the process, budgetary processes. What they're going to release is that Venn diagram. Well, this goes this goes here. They're not going to show you that previously this is what happened. This money was used in here and here. The information citizens get probably from newspapers is that Venn diagram with the divisions of what percentage each of the sectors is getting. But it is not conclusive enough for us to call out our governments, to hold them accountable. Then where is the line of transparency to make sure that we change, we shape the politics of Uganda?
All right, very interesting views. And I want us to interrogate those views as well. My line of question was in terms of the demographics and representation. And you highlight very key issues that we need to have, we need to inform our minds, but also the government, we need to have this information through our education system. Vanessa, I want us to look in our education system. Denise earlier on argued on grounds of we have a militarized government. We earlier on had political education, which was subsequently scrapped off from our education system. And as young people, we ought to hold our leaders accountable. We are supposed to be the bosses of the people who hold those offices. But rather what we see, they want us to look at them as kings and bend to them all the time, yet they're supposed to report to us and be held accountable. So what's happening in Kenya? Kenyans have understood what they want. Kenyans know that their leaders they're not their bosses, but rather they're working for them. Now, how can we then have this? Because fact is, young people in Uganda have very low attention span. They don't like reading. Yeah, majority of young people don't like reading. Now, how can we then have it in our education system? Because I see the feasibility seems to be impossible. So how can we then have something like that to inform young people to be part of this process? What do you think?
Well, I think we can have it through social media.
Social media.
Yes, because most of us young people, we are ever on social media, as someone earlier said. So I think we can, because we have relied on the government and clearly they scrapped off the political education. So I think we should just educate ourselves as us. We hold like campaigns, like small campaigns on social media, educating, Twitter spaces, encourage each other to like hold Zoom meetings about these various issues on the ground. I think that's one way to do it, because I think we shall be able to reach more audiences and we shall be able to get more coverage, because Ugandans are very hard to get through books. Yes. So I think that's one way to do it.
Let's still interrogate that further. Internet penetration in Uganda is low, and very few young Ugandans hold smartphones.
Yeah.
Though they have become relatively cheap. How shall we then reach that Onen down there in Kitgum, who has no smartphone, who has no access to internet, to have this information? Because if we young people want to hold our leaders accountable, everyone must be part of the system. Everyone must be involved. We can think together, but what do you think?
I think we can collaborate with the local leaders, and we inform them of the importance to actually educate the youth about these things, because it's the local leaders that can reach the grassroots. Yes, I think there's that. Then there's also, we should collaborate with specifically our youth leaders, like the National Youth Council leaders, or yes, they should be able to disseminate this kind of information.
All right, thank you. Faustina is smiling. My line of question is still going to be in line of young people. The demographics are in our favor. And the demographics being in our favor, we are the ones who majorly participate in these political crowds. we are the ones who rally behind these politicians, these candidates. And oftentimes when times of elections come, we do not turn up to vote. I just give you an example of my district in Gulu, where only 30% of young people turned up. Now, that means it cuts across the entire country. We had a very low voter turnout, particularly young people didn't want to vote. So Denise highlights issues to do with we need to have our education system imparted with ways of how we can have knowledge put into young people. She also suggests, she highlights very key issues that when we are making decisions, the information will be key in combating ageism, but also we need to decolonize our minds. What is your say?
Thank you for the opportunity. So my say, I think I would actually give maybe a long-term approach. Yeah, it will be something systematic that we actually take it back to the grassroots, like we take it way back to primary. And for the education, we move it from the theoretical, we're teaching, this is how a leader is supposed to be, these are their responsibilities, and now instead try to make it practical. That is, we try to penetrate now into the leader, because we realize we actually have leadership way down from the primary schools. Like we have the head girl and the prefect, but now train, like now put it practical and train these people to actually practically implement these things, implement how to be accountable, like take them through the entire electoral process, way down from that lower level of leadership, that they have to actually convince these people. And yes, even when they are elected into power, give them the opportunity to carry out certain activities that they actually have to account for, not having them there just with titles, but having them practically doing things. Because say this, yes, we have the top management, like the board of governors of the school, but as the student leaders, this also participate in making some decisions. Like they actually have representatives sitting on these councils, and they literally now have to disseminate this information from the board down to the students and have them run projects that they can later have to account for back to the board, that, you know what, we came to you, we told you we had this project. As the leaders want the students to do this. You gave us these funds. We got the funds and implemented this project, and these are the results. This is how we spent the money. Like you realize with that training from a lower level, a person will grow up knowing that, okay, if I'm put into power, I have to do this. I have to be accountable to the people that actually sent me there. So realize if we do it from the lower levels, these people keep on growing with that in their system, because you realize something that you learned while you are a kid. If you're taught as a kid that you are not supposed to do this from a lower level. Okay, yes, we have the curiosity, but yeah, the curiosity coming, but you'll be like, no, my mother told me I don't have to do this. Like you grow with it until like, okay, well, when we grow, our curiosity sometimes gets so high that we say, okay, let me just risk, but realize you actually keep it up for some good time before your curiosity levels get too high. So I think if we actually implement it in a practical way, that we now train these leaders way down from the lowest level of leadership. The time we reach now to the national level, these will be people that have been groomed to be more accountable leaders and will have a better system. And they'll actually understand the importance of the election process, that they'll actively participate, not something that is abstract, that you have come just passing through an education system. Yes, they choose, yeah, we have those elections in school, but you don't find the importance. It's just a title. Like they are not accountable to anything. You don't see any importance of actually you participating in it, or you just vote for the sake whereby in some institutions, actually the administration has greater influence in choosing the leaders. Like they actually appoint the people they feel they want, but not actually exercising the democracy. So someone is growing up already saying that there is no importance of democracy, because they will still choose the people they want. So it's no need. But if we now put back this entire election and democracy back to the grassroots, believe when we reach the national level, long term we'll actually get there.
All right, thank you. Right here, the first half of the conversation, we've been discussing that do political crowds matter in the build-up towards elections. And the wonderful panel has put up a very contested and interesting debate. But just simply before we go into the break, us as young people in our various universities, even when we're electing our leaders, we find ourselves, we make noise oftentimes for the wrong candidates, and yet we have people who front very brilliant ideas. And you find those people with brilliant ideas have very, very small support, very small support, and the ones who make the loudest noise, but with minimal, practical and real solutions, have very minimal, very light support. But that said, they say that the politics of a nation definitely informs the politics of its institutions. So that's it. We shall come back from the break, but other than that, it's been very interesting, and see you in a bit. Thank you.
Digital rights are those human rights and legal rights that allow individuals to access, use, create and publish digital media or to access and use computers, other electronic devices and telecommunication networks. Digital rights include a right to freedom of expression, information and communication through technology, a right to privacy and data protection, a right to credit for personal works, a right to universal and equal digital access, a right to identity, a right to anonymity, a right to be forgotten, and a right for protection of minors, among others. The state's digital rights are frequently violated through various unfair actions, for example, blockage of websites and social networks, theft of credentials, unauthorized use of people's data for personal gain, privacy intrusion, online censorship, arrests and intimidation of online users, internet blockages, and the proliferation of laws and regulations that undermine the potential of technology to drive social, economic, and political development worldwide. It is hence every citizen's responsibility to respect rights of other digital users and to speak out or report to the responsible parties when one's rights are violated.
Welcome back from that break. Right before we went into the break, the panel here was discussing, do political crowds matter in the build-up towards elections? And they have put up a very contested debate here. And from what I get throughout the arguments here, that you see, political crowds in our Uganda here does not per se translate into tangible results. But then I also pose a very practical example that we have the current president whose crowds have really translated into results. And I saw a little bit of smiles here and there, a little bit of uneasiness. But nonetheless, welcome back from the break, and we shall get back into the conversation. Ayebare, Denise, I want us to talk about security and safety. After what Robert, before even Chagulanyi completed the tours, his countrywide tours over the National Unity Platform, his political rally, his tour was called off on grounds of the disorderliness it was causing in the cities, and the proposed idea that there are threats of bombs of terrorism that were rising, among others. Does political crowds in any way in any way affect the orderliness of communities, of societies, or does it disrupt business? So if at all it does, is it necessary to call it off? Because from my knowledge of the law, people have the right of freedom of association and expression. Is it therefore fair to call such tours off?
Okay, previously on, we used to have freedom of speech, but not freedom after speech. But now we have none. We don't have freedom of speech, even freedom after speech is not guaranteed. But whereas that is true, political crowds, it is true, have a tendency of causing security threats, but also disrupting how businesses operate on a daily or anything. But then that does not become ground then to call them off. Why? Because I think we have had organized rallies and organized campaigns. Previously on, we used to have people meet in playgrounds, to meet in certain centers or anything without necessarily marching or disrupting anything that was taking place. So I think we cannot necessarily call off certain things like the rallies or campaigns just because they are a security threat. Yeah. But then the second thing is that whereas they are security threats, we think that for you to have the kind of democracy that you envision, things like mobilization, things like visibility must be put in play. If those certain things are not there, then there is no way you can shape the perception of individuals, because you talk about how we're going to have opinion poll or what are people's perspective about different candidates. So political crowds are very essential in creating that. But then too, about the entire security threats. Security threats are created when someone is threatened. And that is very true. For you to have a political crowd rally behind like NUP or even FDC, there is a certain sort of disruption that has to be caused. Because if people are united, they cannot be divided. Are we together? So now that kind of division that would exist, it is because a certain someone out there is threatened of what divided people would then do. The key is then to keep them divided, because the people united can never be defeated. Yeah.
All right. Dean. Denise says the people united can never be divided. I think that's a chant by Climate. But it's all right. It's all right. It's true. Dean, when I look at the principles of human rights and what the metric that human rights defenders use to determine development, they focus on 5 key things. The so-called panel, that is participation, accountability, non-discrimination, empowerment, respect of rule of law, among others. And in this debate, we're talking about what is happening, and Denise has just highlighted the fact that it's not fair, it's not right to go ahead and deny someone the right of freedom of association, freedom of speech, though she said freedom of after speech is not guaranteed. I think that was said by President Amin. So Dean, I would like you to highlight the issue of human rights, the respect of human rights, the respect of rule of law, in regards to these political crowds, and the implications this possibly has on businesses, among others. Yes.
Thank you so much for that question. Human rights are a very controversial aspect of our life, of our daily life, because everyone has how they understand them. But I will want to understand them from the legal aspect, which says that you have these rights under Chapter 4 of our Constitution, but still these rights under the same chapter can be limited to a particular extent. So the limitation or the criterion followed while limiting these rights is something that is important, yes, but it's also something that gives us the feel of, if I'm to put it out there for the layman, that in everything we do, we must exercise our rights without inconveniencing other people's rights. So it's important to take off the whole shield of this is a human right, but rather also get out of our bubble and accept the fact that yes, we may be exercising our rights, but it doesn't mean that as we are exercising our rights, there is a fella who is trying to get what Uganda calls a melee alilo. So if you bring your rally in the middle of the city, you may interrupt the business income coming in for that particular person. And yet your A is going to come for financial returns and everything that is that, and he has to make money because this person also has a family. So human rights being understood from that perspective, that yes, they are there, everyone has to enjoy them, these rights are inherent, no one has to tell you that this is your human right, you already have it. It's also important to know that they can be limited. And most of these rights that are exercised during rallies like, the one of Bobby Wine and, Mr. Chagulanyi, are rights that are civil and political. And civil and political rights are rights that are understood at a wide spectrum, because one may have the freedom of speech, but may not acknowledge that they actually have the freedom of speech because they want to get to a particular extent of freedom of speech, which can't be reached according to the demographics and the circumstances of the space where you're living, either, or whatever you're doing. So it's important that these political crowds maybe understand that. And that is where it gets to a point one of the panelists was talking about, the civic education that comes with some of this. Because I don't think most of these crowds are actually informed that yes, you can exercise your freedom of speech, but to what extent? Can it be limited? Yes or no? Yes, it can be. And it can be limited rightly, because your freedom of speech doesn't have to inconvenience the other party or any other person. Your freedom of association or assembly doesn't have to inconvenience the other party. So human rights and how they are understood is a very big factor. And this brings me to the point that says that the potential of violence is almost at 90% when it comes to some of these rallies. Because things that happen that we see on TV, maybe you tune in on NTV, on NBS, or you're watching whatever show you're watching, listening to a podcast, you're only going to see the rally happen. You're going to see the president. You're going to see whoever they are following. But things that, you know, the crime rate that happens behind that, the abuse that happens behind that, there are a lot of challenges, the routing, there are a lot of things. And I think everyone could have how they interpret our president's speeches or, you know, addresses to the nation. But these things actually happen. When you say that you're bringing your rally, take it to the stadium. You get? Take it there, but don't put it in the middle of the city, because in the middle of the city, people have their businesses, people are exercising or exploiting their opportunities in this area. So when you bring it and you know the road is not working or whatever is not functioning, that is why I buy the point of, yes, they could be stopped, but not perhaps prohibited, because you could put a halt on them, but not prohibiting them. So the aspect of human rights and how it relates to the political crowds, I think it's important to understand that, yes, we can exercise our rights, we can enjoy them, we can put them wherever we want, but as we are enjoying them, we need to know first that they can be limited. Second, that as we are enjoying our rights, it's important also know that as I'm enjoying my freedom of speech, you get, I don't have to exercise or to reach an extent of defaming a particular person, because that could be, you know, a matter in court. I could be taken to court, but I would have argued that maybe this is freedom of speech, but then it can be limited. So I think that is how we need to understand that. But then the problem is that these crowds are less informed. And it's very sad to say, I don't like telling people that they are less informed, because people take offense in it. Telling someone that, man, you're not informed. People don't like to know that they are not, but the truth is, in our country here, a lot of people are misinformed. If not misinformed, they are disinformed. And if they are not any of the two, then they are not informed at all. So, which is something that happens on a daily. I mean, you get into a conversation with anyone, even in your class, even in the spaces that we be in, someone is typically off the grid concerning the topic you're talking about, which is actually very important for the next generation. So, in everything that we are doing, I think that misinformation, disinformation, and ignorance is the three main things that are affecting our political crowds not to materialize whatever sort of like aura, you know, vote aura they sort of like put out there. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Faustina, I'll come to you. Every time I call your name, you smile.
Sounds nice.
Faustina Claire, you have a beautiful name.
Thank you.
Rule of law and governance. Dean highlights a number of implications that occur during those political crowds. The violations of human rights that happens during, after, or even pre the event. Now, that calls for respect for rule of law. Definitely, certain human rights are going to be violated. That means there will be people will be arrested, and then there are going to be issues to do with others will be arraigned before court, among others. Put the issue of respect of rule of law. Does our country, we have institutions that are supposed to uphold the rule of law, particularly the judiciary. So have we seen them translate or respect rule of law as regards to victims of such violations in these political crowds?
Thank you for the opportunity. Have we seen the judiciary actually translate this in regards to political crowds? Realize at some point for our country, Uganda, we are actually having biased opinions, whereby, yes, rule of law is supposed to take hold, but the scenario where actually these people actually have to now face the rule of law is coming from a background that is already biased. How does that look like? Yes, it's coming from a rally that was held by what they call opposition. And I don't know whether it's just a perspective, because I'm not actively into the law and I don't want to give an opinion that is not best informed. But now this is actually my personal opinion as a person a Ugandan that is down the side, feel that also up there at the judicial level, they're actually already biased in favor of the government. Don't know what exactly is happening there, but the fact that these people are actually being taken there to now face the rule of law from a rally that was held by the opposition, feel actually them getting the actual justice that the rule of law is supposed to offer, the chances are very minimal. Why? Because of the background that you're actually participating in something that is opposition, you're against the government. So, and as the judiciary, ours is actually at some point to protect the government. But then it can actually at some point then zero down to actually civic education. What do we actually know about the rule of law? Sometimes that actually, yes, the judiciary may do a mistake, but if we're actually educated, we would be able to actually iron those things out. But because of ignorance, we'll actually just take it the way it is. That we now can't actually line these people to what exactly it's supposed to be, but just go with what they tell us. So in the end, actually civic education would help to actually solve all that.
All right. Vanessa, civic education, she mentioned. And once you talk about civic education, I think of civil society organizations, the role they're doing in our country in terms of informing Ugandans in regards to their role in their country in regards to civic participation. So how best or how much should civil society organizations do in terms of informing people with their roles and responsibilities to help have an informed political crowd that would one way or the other translate into tangible results in elections?
I think these civil society organizations, as I said earlier, could organize campaigns. The campaigns should be in these areas that are, normally the people who go to do these protests and these campaigns are people who are, I'm sorry to say, idle. Idle.
Really?
I'm sorry to say.
No, I don't think people go to do protests are idle. I was watching something by Vusi when he was talking about the issue relating to people demonstrating against policies that in fact affect them. See, like he was talking from the perspective of South Africa, that policies that the middle class citizen would greatly affect them. They will be busy driving to their offices and they'll leave this, So, but you can proceed.
Okay, I'm sorry to say.
Apology, got it.
No, it's fine. But the fact is, we have very many idle people who actually participate in these rallies.
Yes,
it's true.
And they normally they have a wrong. For them, it's just most of them. It's just entertainment. They're going there for entertainment, so they end up.
I'm going that
What's there to be entertained in tear gas and
That's exactly
actually
the
fun.
curiosity and they want to feel how it feels like to be in a protest.
So that is why we do not see tangible results.
Exactly, because some people go for different things, and most of these people, they be idle, and some go for curiosity and entertainment. So, in other words, they end up getting themselves into. That's where you see they end up getting themselves into clashes and doing things like looting, doing things that they're not supposed to do because they do not know the right purpose they have gone there to do. For them, it's just for fun. But yes, these organizations can, let me say, sensitize people through those speaker things they go around. There's where I come from. There's this morning radio thing they usually speak on. I don't know what it's called, but they usually tell the information that's going to be there throughout the day, like there's the local council is doing this or something is happening. So I think they can utilize that. They can like disseminate information through that. Also, these local chairpersons as well, they can, let me say, in those meetings they have with their people, they can always tell your people to be at least guided and stuff like that. Yes, but basically it's about the communication. It's basically communication. If they can find a way to communicate to these people and they be able to get the message properly, then it will be a very good initiative, because these people, like the civil society organizations, usually they don't go to the grassroots. They just stop at the normal things. Let me
They
say
actually do go to grassroots.
they do it.
We have a number of organizations who go to grassroots, and I think the issue here, in my opinion, could be the issue of how the information is packaged.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, civil society organizations do a lot of paperwork, and they go and give books for people to read of how to exercise the right among others, which I think, in my opinion, is not the best way to give information to people who are largely illiterate. But also, it's important to put information in the language they understand.
Yes, in their native language and in a language that they will listen to and respect that. Because you're not going to go to someone who understands Luganda and you're talking to them in English and they'll be like, they're showing off what. So yeah, I think that's also a good point. And yeah, I think that's it.
All right.
So if I'm to just say something about what she said, that is the idol. It's been like itching. But I think the point to maybe just say it, I think a lot of Ugandans don't have a sense of belonging, and I'm sorry to say, but it's also in our youth a lot. If you asked a youth today, they will tell you that I'm part of the NRM openly. But after like 2 years, you may find when they are moving behind the National Unity Platform or even the FDC, or saying that, oh my God, I'm a youth that recognizes ideas, so I'm behind the Purple Party, which is Alliance for National Transformation. I think that is. So what I'm trying to say is that people are trying to find a sense of belonging, but yes. So in trying to find that sense of belonging, they also caught in one of the biggest
tokenism.
Yes, challenges that we have in Uganda, which is poverty.
Yeah.
So if someone is told that, there is a piece of bread here, whether it's full or not, they will want to weigh. So they will be like, sense of belonging or bread. You get? So they will ask themselves, is it bread or sense of belonging? And people find it so easy to sort of like give away their sense of belonging. Even in our daily activities, someone can be like, I will put myself down just to go through this. But they don't know the sort of like impact it has. Because most of the decisions that we make sort of like project us to the long-term consequences. The law of cause and effects applies harshly. So the sense of belonging. Thank you.
You had something to say.
I just wanted to add on the bit of education. Yeah. Education is key, but actually the mode of, they have tried to educate, but the mode of delivery is one of the things that has actually affected the whole bit of trying to educate people. Realize we have dynamics that the things that are affecting a person in Karamoja are not the same things affecting a person in Western Uganda. So if you come to Western Uganda and you are giving examples of things in Karamoja, the person in Western Uganda won't identify to them, won't feel that they actually impact them. So they literally will just listen to whatever you're teaching them, but won't take it serious. But if in the mode of implementation of the entire aspect of giving education, try to align it to something that that region, I believe the education will be more impactful, because actually these people now actually make it their own, because they feel you are actually talking to them directly, you are speaking to their heart, not just giving them abstract information. Like, it's this and Either they just choose to cram it, but if you explain to something
You make
like
them own.
you make them own the entire aspect, I believe it's a better for them to actually understand and feel, okay, yeah, I actually need to take up this.
Yeah. All right, interesting. We're having a very interesting conversation, but let us do a comparative analysis as we edge towards the end of our conversation. Denise, we have seen Kenya. I've used Kenya as the benchmark for an example of a country where we see political crowds translating into they build up towards elections and actually translate into results. And we've seen that in opinion polls in countries like the United States of America, which is the ideal country we use to as the epitome of democracy. So Denise, comparative analysis. What lessons can we draw from countries whose political crowds we have seen have built towards elections and have translated into tangible results? But even after the elections, people's aspirations and people's needs are being met. What can we draw from them and implement in our system?
Well, on a personal opinion, of recent, I do not consider the states as a model of democracy or even development, actually. But then to the issue of doing a comparative analysis on what other countries have done, like Kenya. I think Kenya is one of the countries in Africa that still has a functioning civil society organization sort of community, as compared to Uganda, where we have dismissed most of them, and most of them are no longer functioning, even with a human rights human rights body. With its dismissal, now it becomes very hard for us then to have the kind of protection or to have the kind of participation that we're going to have. If we say that 78% of young people exist in our demographics, then where are the CSOs to support them in advocacy, support them in youth empowerment, support them in capacity building? Where are they? Whereas countries like Kenya have continuously carried out advocacy, capacity building, you're going to find they're politically alive as a country. When you meet Kenyans, they have a chant, Viva, Viva Comrade, long live the struggle. So you find that in Uganda, we do not even have anything that unites us. What we have divides us more than unites us. You look at Kenya, it has almost like or is only 4 presidential candidates. Dean points out very key issues where he talks about the kind of divisions we have, where you're going to identify as NRM today, tomorrow you're going to identify as ANT, the next day Katumba Oye, the next day you're going to identify as FDC, the next day NUP or anything. So the kind of divisions we have, yet they are pitching the same things, the same ideologies, the kind of continuous fighting that we have, then does not translate into the kind of politics we want or the kind of change that we desire. Whereas countries like Kenya, when they know that they're going to support His Excellence Ruto or His Excellence Raila, they have a division as to why they're supporting one candidate as compared to the other. When you listen to the manifestos of different presidential candidates, you're going to find they have the same things: healthcare, the roads, cutting down the budget, making sure that we have education, free education and everything. But then where do we draw the line exactly? We draw the line where we are empowered to ask for that change. We draw the line where we are included into all these things. But then that comes with having political will of different governments. When you look at the model country you're using, Kenya, I think for far too long they have had some sort of political will from their governments. They have had that kind of conducive environment to support things like protests, support things like demonstrations. So on a comparative, in Uganda, we need a system or we need a situation, like situations that are created where we support democratic processes of demanding for accountability and transparency. Things like protests, things like demonstrations should be normalized. These are not things that are against the government. People are fighting for what they believe in. Kenya, when people are striking, sometimes, let's say in the rare occasions when the police comes in to create some order, these are people that are helped by the police to strike, to demonstrate. They are led by the police. In the cities, Nairobi or anywhere, you're going to find they're using the horses to clear the way for people to demonstrate. Whereas as Uganda, we have not yet even progressed to a quarter of that. Because you're going to strike the police that is supposed to stand with the citizens, is the one that is going to batter them up, is going to bundle them up, tear gas them, shoot at them. So you find that the particular context we exist in frustrates any form of demanding for accountability, frustrates any willingness for us to have things like change, frustrates any willingness for us to demand for what we believe in. So on a comparative, we need to create a conducive environment for participation, conducive environment for democracy, where we have that certain political will to listen to the people. What do the people want? Because like you said, the leaders work for us, we do not work for our leaders. So if they're able to create that political will, but to increase the kind of advocacy, three, increase the youth empowerment through mentorships, through skilling hubs and anything, or the civic education, then it becomes very paramount for us to exist in a paradigm where we can demand for that change.
Beautiful. Perfect.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
On the issue you talked about horses, yeah. So recently, I had a very delightful conversation with someone, and they told me every country is supposed to have a horse rally protest thing, and then I was in argument that Uganda actually doesn't have one. So I wanted to clear that up, and this person claimed that in the 2016 elections there was one.
Wait.
So I was so confused, and I actually wanted to clear that out.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that shows you the comparative analysis that we're trying to do right now from just the model country in East Africa, Kenya. Then, comparative analysis. What lessons do we draw and learn? Denise highlights a number of issues, but I'd also like to hear your insights.
I think it's also important for us to acknowledge the fact that as a country, we have challenges that we need to tackle, first of all, before we try and borrow a few models from here and there. But I'll start from, let's say, we talked about the US. The US, yes, its democracy has developed to, I think, to its peak, and now it's on
Decline.
Yes, a decline because of, a few challenges with the high-level democracy they use. And yes, the opinion polls sometimes dictate, but if I'm to remember, Hillary Clinton and Trump, yes, Clinton had the opinion poll, but Trump took the election. The same thing was working for Trump during Biden's time, but it would rise and then fall like that. So the opinion poll has a lot of factors that come with it. There is a lot of bias, first of all, which, yes, can be expressed also in the secretary, but then the high level of electoral processes that are implemented in most of these countries is high degree, which we may not afford here as a country because we are not well off when it comes to the economic stand. Yeah, but going to Kenya, I think Kenya has developed its, three major institutions to a particular level, and that is the judiciary, legislature, and executive. And there is a specific degree of appreciation of the principle of the three cooking stones and, those systems or institutions working together and coherently. And, they have developed so well when it comes to their judiciary because it's in the recent past that they managed to overturn an election, which was, there was a rerun, which hasn't happened in Uganda, even with the loads of evidence that have been presented to the Supreme Court. So I think Ugandans, what they need is a leaf borrowed from Kenya. I'm not saying Kenya is the most transparent country, but there is a specific level of transparency when it comes to the institutions and how they do public administration. And that's the judiciary. Going to the legislature, I think how they handle their elections, and that is through the number of observers they accept in their country, through the number of through the number of forms and the different detailed processes they use to sort of like get onto that ballot paper and actually also get to vote. I think it is something we can also borrow from that. But I think the most important thing we can borrow from that is the character. And character is something that is very important in politics. Because Abraham Lincoln observes that every human being can stand life's adversities. But if you want to test true man's character, give them power. So the people in power in Uganda have the character, yes, but it's not as stretched as character that could help us get onto that next level of democracy where we have people believing in those leaders, you get, and people holding those leaders accountable, which is what happens in Kenya. Because in Kenya, there is a specific degree of freedom of speech. Their constitution, I think, is more respected. Yes, there are a lot of arguments that come across that forum, but I think their civil society is way developed. I think 10 steps ahead of our own civil society, which is something I think we can borrow from them, how they do, how they respect public opinion, which is not usually something that is easy to do because it requires a lot of finances and a lot of, good financial muscle. But I think the way they have developed their institutions, that is the legislature, the judiciary and the executive, is something that is really very commendable, not only in our East African community, but I think also in Africa, because Kenya has the way they elect their president, the way the crowds transit into the votes that actually come out, the way every detail, the attention to detail, that not only the crowds, but rather also the people who want to become the leaders, the attention to detail. I think it is something that we miss in our political crowds, because our political crowds could rally around because today Bobi Wine is in Mbale, or today Museveni His Excellency is in Barara, or General Muntu is in, let's go and tag along. Maybe there is free lunch, maybe there is this, maybe there is a 20,000, you get? And
let's go and get the chance to see him.
yes, or let's get the chance to see
So
him.
let's get free shots.
Yes, or let's get free shots, or let's do this. I think the sense of belonging is still lacking in Uganda, and the people that can give us that blueprint. I think Kenya has a good crowd, that is the political crowd, that has a strong sense of belonging. If someone is supporting Raila, they are going to be there regardless of anything. If someone is supporting Ruto, and that sense of belonging, I feel like we lack it, because the same people that acknowledged Bobi Wine in Mbale, in Ruelo, may be the same people that show up if the president or the general, Kainerugaba, showed up in the same area. So I think it's the sense of belonging that happens. I remember the scenario when Raila showed up in the area of Luto and actually people didn't show up. Now that is the sense of belonging that I'm talking about. That you know that I'm here and I'm not two-sided as a person. So I think we lack that, and I think something we can borrow. And the other thing I think is, not that Kenya is also the most advanced, it has its issues, but then the detail, I think detail is very important. And if we get to it, it can put us to the next level. Our crowds are not people that actually pay attention to detail. They do, they try. I think National Unity Platform has also been having the Diaspora Conference, which has been going on. But I've tried to listen in here and there because I find their ideas actually interesting. But then the problem, I think it's how they present their ideas.
Yeah.
Because the mode of how they present their ideas is what has made people fail to buy their ideas. Not in the metropolitan area, because people in the metropolitan area are actually tired and I think they want the change. But I want you guys to go back in 2016. I think that was the best election I have seen in Uganda, with a few elections I remember. Because 2016, I think that is when I saw Dr. Besigye bringing people who would come personally. Instead of Dr. Besigye saying, I'm coming to lead you, people wanted him to lead them. And they would show up and they would actually even gift him. They would give you money to go to the next destination. I personally remember someone who even gave him a turkey, even a sofa set, I remember.
That's what happened with Chagula in Luero.
Yes, it happened, but what I'm trying to talk about, why does it happen that way? But when also these other leaders show up, it still happens. Because it happens also when the general shows up. And right now we have the two generals, that is General Nkozi and yes. So whatever the case is, I think we need to, create a particular sense of belonging as ourselves, because it starts with us, as who are here discussing it. If you say that you're NT, stick there and believe in the ideas.
Yeah.
But then also the mode of communication, I
She
think.
got you. The problem is, in my opinion, we have a lot of, as young people, we are only thinking of the survival. What am I eating today?
And that is what I was going to end with. Because
Yeah.
in the recent past, I think I was watching NBS and Samson with his comic starting of the live. He says that there is a problem. The problem is the bread. And I think they're talking about the NBA, I mean the FDC saga. But I think it cuts across. Yes, the problem could be the bread. It could also be the portion of the bread. But the other problem could be that people have already cut from that portion of the bread. But even the bigger problem could be that some people are already eating the bread before we can even plan for what is already there. So the mentality of the bread, the mentality of the bread, and it has gotten into the youth. Right now, even though you're dealing on a small project, I mean,
Everyone wants.
it's very foreign to sit in your class and say that I'm going to help a colleague do something. Actually, people even these days fear to ask for help because they know someone is going to ask the question, does it make commercial sense?
Where do I get from?
Exactly.
And let me listen into the ladies. We'll start with Faustina, then I'll come to you, Vanessa. Comparative analysis. Dean and Denise have done a wonderful, tremendous job in doing a comparative analysis. But I want us to focus on the citizenry. Dean hints on that issue that we need to be we need to be driven. We need to have that character. But then, how can we then make a comparative analysis with the citizenry we see in South Africa, what we see in Kenya? Kenyans in 2007 stood up and said no. And today, they're enjoying the fruits of their hard work. In Uganda here, the contrary. We talk about something today, after 2 days, we are on something else.
We have moved on.
Thank you. Just like earlier on in the conversation you have again stated it that Ugandans, our concentration on something is very minimal. We actually move on with the trend. What is trending is what we go with. And just like Dean said, we actually don't pay attention to detail. Like sometimes we actually move with the trend, but we never actually pay attention even to the detail in that trend. That's why we actually easily transition to something else. But if we could actually pay attention to the detail, would get the best out of what, even though we are still to just move on with the trends, paying attention to detail will still enable us actually benefit from the trends, because some of the trends are beneficial, but by the fact that we actually just take them the way they are, we don't take time to get the actual details of what does this trend contain and how does it affect us, how does it benefit us. We just let things go. So in the long run, you realize we actually just participate. That is, even that zeroes down to the identity that just keep on, NRM is around, and we go back to the Chigati. It's actually having some good Chigati. We run there. So we don't, after running for the Chigati, we just actually keep, because it's what is being painted. But if we'd still break down and now get to know what does NRM do, what are their principles, how do I actually benefit by being part of them, now they would be detail. That, getting the detail will give you, it will trigger you, should I actually identify myself with them other than the Chigati bit of it all? Since we don't take time to do that, we just be there for any time. So if Nope comes up with a bigger slice of bread, obviously now go back to what initially attracted you to NRM was the bread. Now Nope has also brought bread. At this time, the slice is looking bigger. It will still attract you because it's what you are initially attracted to, and you didn't mind about the details, so obviously transition and go there, still just feed. But now if we adopt getting to take time to understand the detail, at some point it will trigger us to actually get a sense of belonging. And when you get that sense of belonging, I believe we'll actually become better citizens, and we'll now try to transition to likes of Kenya, whereby yes, you said they said no, we are not. They said if I'm Ruto, you are Ruto, because you actually identified what they are. So by paying attention to detail, we'll be able to get our own identity. So the fact that we don't pay attention to detail, we actually don't have an identity. We are just we are defined by what is present, what is trending, and not who we are, because we have never taken time to discover ourselves.
All right. Thank you. Vanessa, as we wrap up this conversation, kindly make your comparative analysis with what you see with maybe a model country of your choice, but then also give us your concluding remarks, maybe way forward, what you think we need to do better, and then we can have other panelists do the same and wrap up the conversation.
Okay, my comparative analysis is that, as we have seen in the past years, there's been this problem of dictatorship. Now, this problem of dictatorship happens, and it makes people scared to actually, let me say, they want change, yes. They will talk about change, yes. They will actually come for the protests, yes. But the problem is, in their mindset, they feel like if they do change, something bad is going to happen. Like as she said, they're not willing to make the sacrifice. But other than that, also their mindset. We have talked of young people, young people. Now the old people as well are part of this. And most times it's the old people that vote. Since you said the percentage of young people that vote are very few, so we should also be talking about the old people. Now the old people also want change. It's not that they don't want the change. The problem is they feel like if they change this rule, something bad is going to. They are not certain of a new party coming into place or a new person. They're not certain of what, you know, how we say the roads are bad, there's corruption. They are not certain if we choose this new person, is the corruption going to end? They are not certain if we choose this new person, are the roads going to change? What if he makes it worse? So that's the fear. That's the fear in people's minds. That's why they actually keep on voting the same person all over again. Also, he talked about, there's a point he talked about. Anyways, I'll get back to that. But yes, they fear the change perspective of what is going to happen after. Is there going to be a war? Because this guy, the president came into power because of war. So what they fear is that our grandkids, our children, if we choose someone else, is there going to be another war? So they fear that insecurity they have is leading them to keep on choosing the same person all over and all over again, which is not in other countries. In other countries, we see a sense of security. Yeah. As he talks about Kenya, they have this sense of civil security with them. They know that if we choose Raila or if we choose, yes, maybe there will be war, but it will not be that. They are certain that it's not going to be that disruptive, which is not here. Here, we are not certain what's going to happen after. Because I recently had a conversation with some role model of mine, and we talked about this exact conversation. I asked the person, would you vote another person? Then they said, yes, I've gotten the point you said about the way the mode of delivery of communication of the other parties. The way they bring out their information is sort of different. Okay, it's different is a good thing, whether it's not a bad thing, but there's a way they bring it out. They make it seem like they're violent or they're going to do things in a certain different way that these people are scared of. They're scared of that, okay, we're going to choose this person, but like they bring it in a way that they have, their mindset is a bit youngish, childish. So they bring it in a way that, okay, if we choose this person, he doesn't know what we want, or he's maybe too young to handle such a country. He won't be able to handle like this country. So I think that's the security sense, the insecurity, the fear. Yes, I think that's basically, I think they should find a way of creating, and the mode of delivery as well of information, the way they bring out their information and the way because most times when they do these rallies and these protests, you normally see a lot of violation. it's because even the people he mobilizes are normally the youth, which is a good thing. But it's, the youth, we are very ambitious, determined, which causes a sense of fear in the older people. So they feel like if they put a youth into place, he will not handle the things well, like a mature person is supposed to handle. So I think the mindset bit.
But they are mature.
Yes, I mean,
They're
it's
very
only
chill.
us who can understand, but they can't.
Yeah.
And this all goes back to the electoral system as well, because the people handling this are a bit older. As the youth, we are left in the background. So we are not on ground to actually put in place these things. And this is what causes all this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
As you conclude, give us your parting shots, your final one.
My final word, I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk to you people. This has been a very nice conversation. I've learned a lot, and I'm hoping that it has, this conversation has actually brought about a certain particular change. Yes.
However
and
small it is.
However
definitely
small
has.
it is, I think we have actually made a lot of great notes and a great conversation.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Faustina.
Hey, thank you. My parting shots. As the youth, we are the change makers of the change we actually need to see. And how will we achieve this change? Is by actually getting out of our comfort zone and taking that risk to actually be the leader of the change we want. So it's upon us to take the courage, move out of our comfort zone, and make that first step. Every journey begins with one step, and if we take the first step, we can't fail to take the second one, and we'll actually achieve the change we desire. Yeah, I was very much humbled to be part of this conversation.
Definitely. We are very happy that you joined us. Dean.
Thank you. This conversation has been very interesting.
Yeah.
And the moment I saw it, I thought about my parting shots for the conversation.
All right. So let us, should we drum roll?
So my parting shots are very simple. That let the delusion of a system can exist without being manipulated get out of whomever youth is listening to this. Every system can be manipulated. Every electoral system can be manipulated. Let us be more responsibility driven than lamenting driven, because we have grown up in a generation where people are so focused on pointing the finger rather than
Being pointed at.
being pointed at. So they don't take the responsibility. And to be very honest, I feel like we as the youth, who are the majority of the populace in Uganda, haven't taken up good responsibility. There is an idea that Mike Mason sells, which is called radical responsibility. Something that you take regardless of whether you are to blame or not. Take up the responsibility, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't be having the miscommunication, wouldn't be having the bad communication, or even these unguided political crowds if we were responsible. Secondly, I would like to say that we can all underperform at a particular time, but our youth leaders out there shouldn't be able to underperform to a particular extent. I feel like our institutions that empower the youth in Uganda have not done what it takes to a particular extent to ensure that we have our leaders who are coming from our bracket gain relevance or credibility in front of the people that are yet to go and see the Lord. That is the elderly in our country. And that is why we have challenges like, there is the way we communicate that is kinda, or that comes off as very aggressive.
Yeah.
Sorry to use kinda. But one of the things that are very important when you're dealing with people or even politics, is to understand that yes, change is a fact of life, but that doesn't mean that change can be delayed by the people that saw the change first. So the fact that we haven't seen any change as us, it is important for us to know how to push for this change. Because you could push for change, yes, but to what direction are you driving change? Because a lot of questions could be asked by people who have seen times and tides change either once or twice. So it is important how we drive our change. Lastly, our institutions should be able to create an arena for us as the youth. You get? To be responsible.
Yeah.
To be responsible. I had GRC, right?
Yes.
It starts with us. It starts with us. Be a leader, even in the two people that you're with, even with the person you're sharing a room with, even though it is, be a leader with yourself. A leader with integrity, a leader with responsibility, a leader with accountability. Be accountable to yourself. Be responsible to yourself. Because you cannot be something to someone else if you're not that something to your own self. So it's very important for us to know that as we are pushing for this change, it's very hard to go to Karamoja and tell them, hey, we advocate for you to use these valley dams, you get, to grow these crops. If you're going to, eat GMOs or genetically modified, you get, it is important for you to get to the ground. We as the youth, very many youth don't go back to the village, they despise the place. But let's go back there. Let's do that education on a personal level. Let's give people more reason to not go to go to vote rather than not going to vote. Let's take part in these processes. Let's go on and take part in these processes. Let's be responsible. Thank you so much. It's been a privilege to be here and looking forward for the next discussion. Thank you.
Definitely, that has been a well thought conclusion. So I wouldn't want to to add anything to it. But thank you very much, and I'm definitely delighted and happy that you joined us for this wonderful discussion to listen to your wonderful insights and your thoughts, which are very intriguing. Thank you. Ayebare, Denise.
Well, I think everyone parted with my shots. Coming last is not easy. So, well, to the young people, I believe it starts with us, actually, like everyone said, but we need to immerse ourselves in the kind of knowledge, in the kind of things we would speak about or anything. But then a desirable Uganda that we all want to see is still a hope that we should hold. We should not give up that thought. But then as a nation, we need to unite, recognizing that the kind of democracy, strategic democracy that we want does not only lie in the voices of politicians, but lies in the determination and unity of us, the citizens. And we can continuously have the kind of change that we desire. It's a pleasure to have had you.
Young people, it's all right. I take it. It's also a pleasure to host this wonderful panel, which has been tremendous and outstandingly performed well. To me, my name is Douglas Onen. I've been your moderator for tonight's conversation, and tonight we have been discussing the topic or question that do political crowds matter in the build-up towards elections, of which I think the panel did a tremendous job in justifying that statement. Otherwise, it has been us, Center for Constitutional Governance, Civic Space TV, who brings to you these weekly conversations on inter-university debates. Otherwise, thank you to the technical crew, Rashid and team, for making sure the conversation is aired on time for our viewers to have it there with them. Otherwise, keep the conversation going, put it on the comment section, can go ahead and also subscribe as well. Otherwise, see you again, same time, same place. From me and the panelists here, a blessed week. Bye-bye.